Hi everyone, my name is James, and today I'm going to be building a woodworking mallet. I'm going to be using this Lignum Vitae for the head of the mallet, and I'm going to use Paduk for the handles. Lignum Vitae is a pretty special wood. It's actually the densest wood in the world. This piece of Paduk has some really beautiful flame grain patterns, which we'll see in just a minute. I can only find 4/4 stock for this, so I'm going to have to cut it down and join it together to get the thickness I need for the mallet handle. I'm going to go ahead and surface one side of this so that I can glue them together there, and that will give me a perfect fit between the two pieces. And here you can see that really beautiful grain pattern. So the inspiration for this mallet is Thor's hammer. My wife and all my daughters love Marvel, the comic books, the movies, everything. And I guess I do too. So it plays big in a lot of things that we do here. If anyone decides that this is a project they must do and they're not quite sure how to go about it, I do offer a comprehensive set of plans, and the link for that is in the description. And there we go, just barely enough clamps. Couldn't have fit another one on. And look out, there's my daughter, the photobomber, right now. Alright, so we scraped as much of the wax as we could off of this piece of wood. I'm going to go ahead and joint it. If you do this, be very careful jointing a short piece. Follow your jointer's instructions. Make sure you don't try to joint something that's too short. So all I'm doing here is I'm going to saw it down on the table saw now to get a parallel cut to the surface that I just jointed. And I'm going to get this thing down to a square. In this particular case, I don't really care the exact size of the square. It's approximately 3 by 3, but here again, it's not critical. I'm just going to use as much lumber as I can get. I am looking for a 6-inch piece here. It was about 1/8 over, so I'm just going to take about a 1/16 off of each side. This is a pretty interesting wood to work with. It's a very fragrant wood and has a very good smell to it. Now it's time to finally start putting some of those characteristic shapes to it that makes it look like Thor's mallet. I've built a little L bracket of sorts out of plywood to help me hold this piece of wood in place so that I can safely pass it over the table saw. For this cut, you could certainly use a table saw sled if you feel more comfortable. I have my table just recently waxed, and the blade here is actually only sticking up about a 1/16 of an inch. So the piece moves very smoothly across it, and I do feel comfortable doing this cut. If you don't feel comfortable doing a cut, don't. Find a safe way to do it. And our mallet head here is slowly starting to take shape. And a little bit of detail sanding here on those corners. If you don't happen to have a strip sander, it's really no problem. Any sander in the world would work with this. You could use a block sander, do it by hand. You can use a palm sander, a belt sander, a disc sander. There's a lot of ways to do it. I just happen to have this sitting on my bench, and so that's what I chose. Okay, so I have the shape finalized and the coarse sanding done. So this kind of gives us a good idea of what it's going to look like. And this right here is the fastest way to remove a clamp. Did you see it? Well, let me play it again for you. Right there, did you see it? It was too fast, I think. I'll do it one more time. And there it is. Got to clean up a little bit of this glue, and then I'm going to cut the corners off on the table saw so that I can turn it round on the lathe. And unfortunately, as I'm putting this on the lathe, I run into a problem. Just a couple of hits in, and the piece cracks on me. I don't know if you see it right there. Crack develops, and unfortunately, I can no longer use this piece. Yeah, this is very unfortunate. The crack is there. It starts at the end and goes practically halfway down the wood. It's on both sides. It's not exactly on the glue joint either. So looks like I'm going to have to switch up and use this other piece of wood I have. Now this piece is red heart. It's also very beautiful wood. I would have loved to have used the flame grained Paduk, but that's okay. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do to finish your project. Red heart is a wonderful wood. It's a brilliant pink reddish color. Very beautiful. It turns so easy on the lathe. It's very soft. The few times I have had the privilege of turning it, it's turned out wonderfully. Maybe I should rephrase that. The wood itself is not terribly soft. It's not a low density wood. It just cuts so smoothly it feels like you're cutting something soft. It doesn't chip out. It's just great. Here I'm shaping the back end of the mallet handle. And here's something that I like to do. When I turn mallet handles on the lathe, I like to get a sanding block and remove a lot of the material right at the end with the sanding block. That allows me to get a nice, flat, straight, smooth, edged finish. It's important to note that that sanding block I was using is made of foam. It's very lightweight. It probably weighs maybe 1/2 ounce. So if anything were to happen and that was to fly out of my hand, it really wouldn't be able to injure me because it has very little mass. And I do wear a face shield. This bar that I'm using here, it looks a little bit like a wax. It comes from a company called Hut Products. They don't actually tell you what's in it, they just tell you that it's a wood finish. But what I do know is that it fills very tiny scratches and imperfections left from turning and leaves it with a beautiful finish. The friction from applying it actually sort of melts it and sticks it onto the wood. And then I just take a towel and hold it against the wood snugly and it buffs it off. So it does act a lot like a wax-based product. I like to put this on most of the spindles and things that I turn, and then I go through the process of the rest of my assembly. And then after that, a day or so has gone by, and I find that it takes a lacquer top coat really well. Now I'm just marking the exact center of the mallet head in order to put a hole in it. So here's kind of a good tip. Whenever I'm turning a spindle, especially for a one-off project, and I've got to fit it into a hole at some point in the future, I'll decide on the size that I need, let's say 1 inch. Now I won't go and drill the hole in the piece until after the spindle is done and complete. Because if for any reason I mess up when turning the spindle and it ends up a tiny bit smaller, then I can always end up drilling a smaller hole. Like I could go to 15/16, or I could go down to 7/8. And I had to do that exact same thing here. Now if the project is more important and I'm taking my time, that's really not a concern. But if it's something I'm just trying to knock out in an afternoon, like I did this here, then I just go pretty quickly and I just make sure that I drill the hole after I've turned the mallet down. That way I can match the hole to that. The initial fit was just a tiny bit snug, so I wanted to file some off and scuff it up real good so that the glue will bond a little bit better. If you cut this excess off with the mallet head in place, do not cut the mallet. Thor will not be pleased, and neither will my daughter. Putting a little slot in the top of the spindle so that I can drive a wedge in there after it's all assembled. I'm drilling this hole right below where I cut the slot down to. The drill bit's about twice the diameter of the width of the slot. And now the bottom of the slot has a nice rounded surface, so it's a lot less likely to split and have that split go further down. Now we're going to need that slot to be perpendicular to the long axis or to the grain of the mallet head. Probably not super critical for a great big beefy piece of wood like this, but it's a good practice to keep because it can prevent the mallet head from splitting if you drive the wedge in too much. And I really like to sand these flush. Some people like to leave them proud, so I think that's probably just personal preference. So I got a little bag of leather from my local craft store. I think it was a Michael's or Hobby Lobby or something like that. I'm going to put a little leather strap at the back end of the mallet. Certainly not a big deal for a woodworking mallet, but absolutely critical if you want to play like your Thor. No matter how many times I drill this red heart or cut it on the lathe, I'm always amazed by the brilliant red sawdust that comes out. You can probably see my idea here with the leather. I'm just going to try to roll one piece up and roll the other piece over it, and I'm going to put it down in that hole that I just drilled. I'll be gluing up each of these layers, and it'll go in pretty securely. I've done this a few times, and I've never actually had one come off. Hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing there. I know it's hard to see around my big fat fingers in that little teeny tiny area. But I got the first one rolled up. I'm gluing it. I'm gluing the outside of it, and I'm going to get the second side rolled up around that. I am using wood glue here, which works pretty well with leather, especially when the surfaces are roughed up. It is not the best glue. There are better glues specifically made for this, but I'm not just going to be relying on the glue. I've got a little trick here. So I actually have this whole thing inserted about an inch down into the mallet handle. So it's going to have quite a bit of contact surface area. So I'm going to open up the flaps of the leather, kind of expose the hole down the center of what I rolled up, and I'm actually going to drive this piece of Paduk down in there. So we're going to glue it in here, but you can tell by the size it's going to be a very tight fit, so that's going to give us some great mechanical hold also. There, now with that thing fixed permanently there, I think we can go into battle without any fear of losing our hammer. A little bit of spray lacquer, some semi-gloss, that will finish it off, and we should have a beautiful mallet.